Hey, my name's Chris, and I'm with the Overland Channel here. And recently I got a couple of these Tuffy products, and I wanted to do a little installation video, show you how the installation worked on my Dodge 1500 Rebel. So if you aren't familiar, the Dodge Ram has these cool little boxes underneath the floor mats in the back. However, they're not secure. Our friends at Tuffy have these plates, these lids that you can put on and actually lock them. I wanted to install them in my truck. First thing I did is I got out the instructions, made sure, they say how many bolts are supposed to be there, but it's good to double check that stuff before you get too committed. And it comes with 4 of these bolts you put in there, and then there's a couple more we're going to see later. I'm no expert, but I got to say, I really felt that these things were built strong. It looks like it's good grade aluminum, I guess, and a good locking mechanism. And the keys felt totally solid. The only difference I would make to the recommended tools is the 10mm socket or wrench could be replaced with a socket that you put on an impact driver. Just make things go easier. Next, you're going to remove the factory lids, and that involves a 4mm hex tool. And you just got to take out all the bolts, and eventually you pry off these little clips here, and then you'll be able to pull the original factory lids off. If you remember, I said that there was 6 bolts, and the additional 2 bolts are underneath the factory lid. So there's 4 to remove the lid, and then you got these 2 other bolts down under here, and all these are going to be replaced with the new stuff from Tuffy. So I'm not going to lie, this step was absolutely not necessary, but as you're taking things apart, eventually you just feel like you have to pull this part out. You don't need to pull this part out. It was at this point I realized I probably didn't have to take that out, but fun. Had I actually read the instructions, I would have realized I didn't have to remove that box. I just needed to remove those 2 bolts, because presumably you need to replace them with the flathead screws that come from Tuffy. Clearance for the lid, I have to assume. I like to be careful when it comes to hardware, just to make sure I actually have all the pieces that I'm supposed to have. It's good to count this stuff out. Now it's time to place the lid over the hole and go ahead and open it up. Like I said, the keys are great. And line it up and start putting the bolts in. Although I didn't have a 4mm hex bit, I probably would have used it with my impact driver. However, on something like this, you want to be really careful not to over tighten anything too much. So it's a good idea to kind of ease them all in, obviously. And that's it. There's the lid. You're pretty much done. Okay, here's my final impression after installing one of these guys. First off, the installation is completely seamless. You can't tell that there's a lockbox there underneath my mats. And it's totally secure because it has a lock. Looks nice. It's really cool. On the downside, and this is minor, but one of the things that I always thought was really nice, I liked this finish. Who cares? It's underneath the mat. The Class B thing was fine. What you don't get to use is the removable bin, which could be of use if you had to clean it. And the other thing that you don't get to use are the factory tie-down straps, which were integral to these things right there and there. So as long as that's not a problem, these are fine. These are cool. So after doing the time lapse on the second side, I noticed on the instructions, which I should have read, there are measurements laid out to modify the original inset boxes. And what I've done is I've transferred those measurements over with this scored line. Looks like I have to cheat up a bit just from that. And so I'm going to cut this part out. And allegedly, you do that, then you cut off these little tabs, and you'll be able to use this inside the box underneath the Tuffy lid. I'm realizing that this is why they said you should have a blade, but why use a knife when you could use a power tool? That just seems silly. So we'll cut this off with the jigsaw. And taking care to do it properly. What's interesting is it says to go ahead and use the measurements that are actually on the box, because this is like set up for, I don't know, measuring your fish or whatever. Not that anybody who'd want to put their fish inside their truck like this, but anyway, I'm gonna just follow these lines I've laid out. Yeah, looks fine. Might want to pull that measurement in a little bit so it's centered, but it totally fits in the thing.